What is going on, Notre Dame fans? Mike Singer from blueandgold.com with beat writer over at BGI, Tyler Horka, discussing Brian Kelly's press conference and the depth chart that Notre Dame put out at the same time Kelly started his presser. Let's go straight to the depth chart. We'll leave it up here for a little bit so you guys can take it all in. I mean, nothing seemed to really be different. I know Jordan Botelho's on the depth chart. We'll talk about him a little bit. It seems pretty much the same as last week for the most part, I believe, unless there's something I'm missing. Now, you wrote a column on Monday morning, your Hey Horka column, love the name, addressing the question, should Notre Dame switch anything up on the offensive line? What did Brian Kelly have to say about that during his press conference?
Well, I thought it was really interesting that he seemed pretty adamant that Notre Dame is playing the best five offensive linemen that the Irish have on the roster, and obviously that's minus Blake Fisher, who's going to be out with a little bit of time after undergoing knee surgery, and then Michael Carmody gets a little banged up with a lower body injury of his own. He's got an ankle sprain, so they're all the way down to Tosh Baker. I know Carmody is there on the depth chart. Brian Kelly said that he would be available potentially, but they're being really cautious. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a lot of Tosh Baker against Purdue on Saturday. And look, this is an offensive line that has really struggled, right? So if Brian Kelly is adamant that Notre Dame has been playing the best five guys, that means guys like Rocco Spindler, John Dirksen. I know John Dirksen's a senior, but Joe Alt, those types of guys just aren't ready yet to.
I love Joe Alt.
I know you love Joe Alt, but look, he's a freshman and he's probably not ready for these kinds of moments. So it was interesting to hear Kelly say that they're rolling out the five guys that Notre Dame needs to be rolling out. But he also said maybe Zeke Correll, Kane Madden start to rotate a little bit with the likes of Spindler and Dirksen at the left and right guard spots, respectively. Because, look, those guys are getting worked a little bit. And when they get worked early, they tend to get worked a little worse later in the game just because they're tiring out. So I would look for a little bit of guard rotation this weekend.
Yeah, when you look at the quarterback depth chart, you got Cohn, Pyne, and Buckner, respectively. I mean, everyone's talking about Cohn and Buckner, but I felt like you asked a really good question. What does this mean for Drew Pyne? Like, if Cohn's going to go down, what does it mean for Tyler Buckner and Drew Pyne? Like, who would be the guy? So Horka asked that question, and here's what Kelly had to say.
No, we think Drew's extremely capable of leading that drive as well, and he has, in our 2-minute on Wednesdays, he'll go in and run with the first group. We try to keep them all sharp, never knowing what the circumstances might be. No, we've got great confidence in Drew.
So in the event that Jack was not available long-term, would you turn to Tyler, or is Drew, ready for that?
They're all very capable of running our offense. I think circumstances really dictate how you would move in that direction, but I don't know that there's 1 second of hesitation between Tom and I relative to what Drew's capable of doing and how he can run our offense.
So that was your question, Tyler. What was your reaction to what he had to say?
I didn't take too much away from it. I mean, look, they're confident in Drew Pyne. Of course, Brian Kelly is going to say that, but I do think it's interesting, like you said, if Jack Cohn were to go down for an extended amount of time, what does the quarterback situation look like then? I think it becomes really a two-quarterback system at that point, just because you have a guy in Drew Pyne and you have a guy in Tyler Buckner who Tyler Buckner has, more collegiate experience, I would say, than Drew Pyne at this point. I know Pyne came in, a little bit last year, but Buckner was really counted on in some big spots in a close game this past weekend. So I think those guys would work in tandem because, look, I know Tyler Buckner got a lot of run against Toledo this past Saturday, but for the most part, it was kind of gimmicky situations. He came in to almost run exclusively. I know he completed 3 passes, but that pass to Chris Tyree, which took up the bulk of his passing stats on Toledo, that was game plan. That was formatted. Obviously, everything was going right. He looks back to his left, and Chris Tyree is all alone. So I want to see what Tyler Buckner would look like in a true 4-quarter situation. I'm not sure if he's ready for that. So that's where I think Drew Pyne would factor in, and that's why I asked Kelly that question.
Yeah, I kind of go back and forth on this. Like, one, I definitely agree with your point that, it was very much like, I mean, dare I say it was kind of like a wildcat type thing where he was not coming in as a traditional quarterback. Like, I do think he had one drop back throw, but yeah, it was very gimmicky. Can he do that versus Cincinnati, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, and Wisconsin? Very much TBD. But I do feel like if, knock on wood, if Jack Cohn were to go down, I personally feel like Tyler Buckner. I think he would be the guy. They might give Drew Pyne a shot, but I feel like it would be Tyler Buckner. Maybe something like where Drew Pyne's taken the first series, but and being the starter. But I personally feel like Buckner would be taking most of the snaps. For Notre Dame's sake, you hope that does not happen. Now, Brian Kelly was asked about the status of Prince Colley, Sibo Flemister, and Jordan Botelho. Colley, of course, he is listed as the second string will linebacker. Sibo Flemister not even listed on the running back depth chart. I've never seen a running back depth chart with only two guys. Usually it's 3 to 5 deep. And Jordan Botelho back on the depth chart at the Viper position. He's an or with Justin Adamalola. What did Kelly have to say about those three guys, and what was your take on what he said?
Yeah, he said Jordan Botelho will be available Saturday, and he said the other two guys are not available, and he kind of left it at that. So it's really interesting. These guys, their names have surfaced quite a bit in the first couple weeks of the season because they've been kind of question marks, if you will. And I think they're going to remain question marks until we see them on the field. Even with Jordan Botelho, I know there was some offseason uncertainty there for various reasons, and Kelly addressed it in a press conference during fall camp, and he said, yeah, Jordan Botelho is available. He's going to play. Obviously, that hasn't been the case the first couple of weeks. Could be the case this week. I think all three of those guys are going to remain up in the air until we actually see them on the field. Until Sibo Flemister is getting a carry, we're going to be left in the dark on his situation. So I do think Botelho might play this week just because that Notre Dame defense needs a spark, needs someone to be able to come in there and look. If Notre Dame had 11 guys playing like J.D. Bertrand, then they'd be in good shape. But that hasn't really been the case. There's been missed tackles. There's been missed assignments. Notre Dame defense needs something. I would look for Jordan Botelho if, like Brian Kelly said, is available this week to come in there and try to make some plays.
Kelly's been very coy about, those three guys. And I've seen, comments on YouTube and our Blue and Gold message board that people are upset with Kelly. Like, do you really, what's the upside for him in going out and getting into the weeds of these kids' situations, whatever they may be? Kelly would be better served not being honest or, blatantly upfront about some of these things for the betterment of his football team. Last thing, he was very confident about the offensive line. And I know we touched on this earlier in the show, but he seemed like, look, it's not just a matter of, offensive line skill or strength. Like, there's a lot of things that go into the offensive line. You mentioned the cornerback blitz. Like, that's not on the offensive line. That's something that the quarterback and the running back hope to pick them up, or, those kind of different things. So what'd you think about, his confidence in that unit?
I think it's a situation of this is what Notre Dame has. And like you said, we touched on it earlier. What more could Brian Kelly, Jeff Quinn, any of these guys do to make this struggling Notre Dame offensive line better? It just kind of is what it is at this point. You hope that it progresses from week to week and makes improvements. But right now, like I said, is Rocco Spindler your savior at left guard? Is Tosh Baker going to come in and play as talent? He doesn't have the talent that Blake Fisher has, but that's what Notre Dame is left with right now. And I think that was pretty telling during the Brian Kelly press conference. Was multiple times he said, look, we're down to our third string left tackle. I don't think there's a lot of teams across the country that get down to their third string left tackle and have a solid offensive line.
But Tyler, he doesn't even want to move anybody around. Like, I think you could move Josh Lugg to left tackle, maybe slide out Patterson to right tackle, Zeke to center, Rocco left guard. There's different things that they could do there. Like, if he doesn't, I know he showed some confidence in Carmody and Baker, but if behind the scenes he actually doesn't, there's different ways that they could move this thing around. He also talked about rotations on the interior offensive line.
Yeah, I just don't know. Are those things that you do all in one fell swoop? Do you put Zeke at center and move Patterson out to guard, or even tackle. I know Brian Kelly kind of shut that down after the game on Saturday, and he said, look, we're not playing Jarrett Patterson at tackle. He doesn't really translate to tackle, but I do think that you're right in saying that something has to happen. And I wrote about that in the Hey Horka column that you mentioned. Something's, the definition of insanity, I know this is super cliche, is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? You've got to do something. But if this is the offensive line that Notre Dame thinks is its best five, then if you drastically switch it to something that is, incredibly different from what they're rolling out right now, does that mean it's going to be even worse than it is now? I don't know. It's kind of a trial by error type of thing, but Notre Dame's running out of time. The schedule's getting pretty tough pretty soon, so I just don't know what more they can do.
Brian Kelly also said Liam Eichenberg wouldn't be a tackle, and he just started as a rookie at left tackle for the Dolphins, albeit they had an injury there. I'm a Dolphins fan, so I certainly noticed, and Eichenberg did struggle a little bit. But yeah, it would be kind of a desperate move right now if they just completely shifted the offensive line. And although I kind of like that unit I just laid out, because for me, I think, Josh Lugg, Jarrett Patterson, probably your best two offensive linemen right now. I like him at tackles, even if Patterson, if that's not his ideal position, still kind of like him there. But personally, I digress. Well, Tyler, appreciate you joining us, man. For the folks watching, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more content. We'll catch you next time.